Digestion is a process of taking food and breaking it up into small pieces so it can be absorbed into the blood. It then goes around the body and goes to all of the different cells and provides the nutrients for energy and for building. And so the digestive system is a whole series of different organs that all work together to achieve that function of digestion. I'm going to talk you through the different organs and what their functions are. We'll start with the mouth, and in the mouth we have teeth and a tongue. And both of those are involved in mechanical digestion. So the teeth physically, mechanically break up the food into smaller pieces. And the tongue moves the food around in the mouth and breaks it up as well. So it's about mechanical digestion. But also in the mouth we have salivary glands. So they're up here and they're down here, and they excrete saliva into the mouth, and so they lubricate the food. But they also release these things called enzymes. And enzymes are really important because they're chemical or biological catalysts. And their job is they're like chemical scissors, and they chemically snip up the food into smaller pieces. They start that process here in the mouth and continue it through into the stomach as well. So we've got our teeth and our tongue, and then we've got salivary glands. And they produce enzymes. So they produce enzymes, which is chemical digestion. So after the mouth, the food then moves down a muscular pipe called the esophagus. And the esophagus, the role of the esophagus is just simply to move food from the mouth into the stomach. But it does that through a muscle, so when it contracts, it actually pushes food down. So if you imagine you've got a bolus of food here, when the tube contracts, it runs the food down the tube into the stomach. And that's the role of the esophagus. Okay, it just simply moves food to the stomach. So next we have the stomach. And the stomach here is a muscular bag. And it churns the food. Food spends around about 4 hours in the stomach. And it's continually churning and churning and churning with the enzymes working, and also stomach acid. So it's a very acidic environment. So in the presence of the stomach acid and the churning of the stomach, the food gets broken up into very, very small parts. After the 4 hours in the stomach, the food is a paste, a liquidy paste. And it then moves out of the stomach into the first part of the small intestine, which I want to tell you about because it's got a specific purpose, and it's called the duodenum. And it's involved in the digestion of fats. So up here we've got our liver, and one of the functions of the liver is to produce this stuff called bile. Bile then gets stored in something here called the gallbladder, and it goes into the duodenum via the bile duct. And what the gallbladder does is it emulsifies the fats so that they can be broken up. It's just like a dishwashing liquid that cut through the grease on your oil and your greasy plates. So the gallbladder stores the bile, and in the duodenum it emulsifies and digests the fats. Then we've got our small intestine proper. Now the small intestine is a very long organ, and it's all folded up on itself. So it's very hard to sort of follow. So I'm just going to kind of draw it like this, but you need to imagine it's a continuous tube, and it finishes off down here. So that's the small intestine. Now, If we had a look at the wall of the small intestine, the inside wall of the small intestine, we would see that it's got a very, very large surface area and has these finger-like projections called microvilli. So that increases the surface area. So inside of the microvilli, we have small capillaries or blood vessels that run through like this. The wall of the small intestine is very thin, so if you've got very, very small microscopic food particles, glucose and amino acids, etc., well, they're actually able to move across the wall of the small intestine into the blood. And they do that because there's a higher concentration of these food particles on the inside of the small intestine, so they move across along their concentration gradient. More about diffusion in another video, but that's essentially what happens. Is very small particles, they're able to move across the wall of the small intestine into the blood. Then they're taken through the blood to the rest of the body. Right, so at the end of the small intestine, all we've got left is waste. And so that way, I need to write here small intestine before I do that. So the role of the small intestine is absorption of nutrients into the blood. At the end of the small intestine, all that is left is the waste, parts that the body cannot digest and doesn't need. And so it doesn't just exit the body straight away, it spends another 12 hours in the body, in the large intestine. So this is the large intestines here. Sometimes it's called the bowel. So the large intestine, and the role of the large intestine is to absorb any excess water, because we don't want to pass that water through the anus and waste it. So it spends another 12 hours in there for any extra water to be absorbed back or into the blood. And so after those 12 hours though, the waste is stored in this thing here called the rectum, and then finally it's passed out via the anus. So the large intestine is involved in absorption of water. A large amount of water is also absorbed in the small intestine, but any extra water is absorbed in the large intestine. And then of course we've just got our rectum and our anus, and the rectum is just storage. It's just like a holding bay for the waste, and then we've got our anus, which is where the waste gets passed. Okay, and so they are the organs involved in that continuous tube from the mouth all the way through to the anus. Now we've obviously got other organs that play a part as well, because I mentioned the liver, the gallbladder, etc. They also are involved in the process. And of course our salivary glands as well. So all of these organs work together to absorb nutrients out of the food. So take a solid piece of food and make it into small enough pieces so it can actually be absorbed into the blood.